Today, we are going to be doing part 5 of Refugee. That's right? Yep. And we're reading from page 74 to page 92, starting out with Joseph. Somewhere on the Atlantic Ocean, 1939, 8 days away from home. Finally, Shabbos arrived. It was the day that Joseph would leave his childhood behind and become a man. He could hardly contain his excitement. The ship's bulletin board announced that the first class social hall would be converted into a synagogue and a Jewish house of prayer, which meant that Joseph might have his bar mitzvah after all. He was careful not to show his eagerness in front of his father, however. What would once have been a happy occasion in the Landau home was now fraught with anxiety, thanks to his father's paranoia. A synagogue on board a ship? Papa said. He shook his head as he paced their little room in his oversized nightclothes. The captain himself arranged it, Mama said. Ridiculous. Did no one else see the Nazi flag overhead as we came on board? Will you not go to your son's own bar mitzvah, then? Yosef's mother and Ruthie were already dressed in their nice Shabbos dresses. Yosef wore his best shirt and tie. Bar mitzvah? There won't be enough men there to form a minyan, Papa said. By tradition, 10 or more Jewish men, a minyan, was needed for a public service. No one who has lived in Germany for the past 6 years would be so foolish as to go to a Jewish service aboard a Nazi ship. Papa ran his hand over his shaved head. No, it's a trap, meant to lure us out. That's when they'll snatch us. A trap. Mama sighed. All right, then. We'll go without you. He left him pacing the room, muttering to himself. Joseph felt like someone had yanked his heart from his chest. In all the times he dreamed of this day, his father had always been there to recite a blessing with him. But maybe this is what becoming a man is, Joseph thought. Maybe becoming a man means not relying on your father anymore. Joseph, his mother, and Ruthie stopped short just inside the first-class social hall. There weren't the required 10 men for the service. There were 100 men, probably more, all wearing yarmulkes and that's how you say it, right? And their heads and white and black talsum prayer shawls around their shoulders, on their heads. The card tables had been pushed to the sides of the room, and stewards were adding more chairs to accommodate the crowd. A table in the front held a Torah scroll. Joseph stood and stared. It felt like ages since he'd been inside a synagogue. It had been before Kristallnacht, before the Nuremberg laws that made the Jews second-class citizens, before the boycotts and the book burnings, before Jews were scared to gather together in public places. Joseph's parents had always taken him to synagogue with them on Shabbos, even when other parents left their children with their nannies. It all came flooding back to him now, swaying and humming along with the prayers, craning his neck to see the Torah when it was taken out of the ark and hoping to get a chance to touch it and then kiss his fingers as the scroll came around in a procession. Joseph felt his skin tingle. The Nazis had taken all this from him, and now he and the passengers on the ship were taking it back. Gustav Schroeder, the ship's diminutive captain, was there to meet them in the door. In the galley above the room, a number of the off-duty crew had gathered to watch. Captain, asked a rabbi, one of the men who was leading the service, I wonder if we might take down the portrait of the Fuhrer, given the circumstances. It seems inappropriate for such a sacred moment to be celebrated in the presence of Hitler. Joseph had seen paintings of the Nazi leader all over the ship, and the first-class social hall was no exception. A large portrait of Hitler hung in the middle of the room, watching over them all. Joseph's veins ran with ice. He hated that man. Hated him because of everything he'd done to the Jews, but mostly because of what Hitler had done to his father. Of course, Captain Schroeder said. He quickly called over the two of the stewards and soon they had the portrait down and were taking it from the room. In the gallery above, Joseph saw one of the crew slam a fist down on the railing and storm off. Joseph's mother gave him a kiss on the cheek, and she and Ruthie went to sit in the section reserved for women. Joseph took a seat in the section with the men. The rabbi stood in front of the crowd and read from Hosea. Then it was time for Joseph to recite the blessing he'd been practicing for weeks. There were butterflies in his stomach, and he got up in front of such a large audience, and his voice broke as he stumbled through the Hebrew words, but he did it. He found his mother in the crowd. Her eyes were wet with tears. Today, Joseph said, I am a man. Many hands to shake and many congratulations after the ceremony. But it was all a blur to Joseph. He felt like he was walking in a dream. For as long as he could remember, he'd wanted this, to no longer be a child, to be an adult. Joseph's mother and sister left to go back to visit his father in their cabin. Joseph walked the promenade deck by himself, a new man. Renata and Evelyn jumped out from behind a lifeboat and grabbed Joseph by the hand. Without their parents on ship, they had skipped the synagogue to play. Joseph, come stand guard for us, Renata cried. Before he could protest, the girls dragged him to a women's restroom. He was afraid they were going to pull him inside, but instead they deposit him by the door. Excuse me, sorry. Yeah, yell if you see someone coming, Renata said breathlessly. We're going to latch all the stalls from the inside and crawl out under the door so no one can use the toilets. No, don't, Yosef tried to tell them, but they were already gone. He stood there awkwardly, not sure if he should stay or go. Soon the sisters ran back outside, hanging on to each other with laughter. A young woman staggered past them, clutching her stomach and looking green. Renata and Evelyn got quiet, and Yosef could hear the woman desperately rattling the stall doors, looking for a toilet. The woman lurched out of the bathroom, looking even more green and desperate, and wobbled away. Renata and Evelyn burst into laughter. Yosef raised himself up. This isn't funny. Go in there and lock those doors this minute. Just because you had your bar mitzvah doesn't make you an adult, Renata told him, and Evelyn stuck her tongue out at him. Come on, Evie, let's do the bathrooms on A deck. The girls tore away, and Joseph huffed. They were right. A bar mitzvah alone didn't make him an adult. Being responsible did. He walked along the promenade, looking for a steward he could tell about the bathroom stalls. He saw two stewards who had stopped to look over the side of the sea, and came up behind them. Must be going 16 knots easy, said one of the stewards. Captain's got the engines maxed out. He has to, the other said. The mother two ships is smaller and faster. They get to Cuba first and unload their passengers, and who knows? Cuba might decide she's full up with Jews, and when we get there, turn us away. Yosef looked out to sea. There wasn't another ship on the horizon, as far as he could see. What other ships were they talking about? More ships full of refugees? And why did it matter which one got there first? Hadn't everyone on board already applied and paid for visas? Cuba couldn't turn them away, could they? One of the stewards shook his head. There's something they're not telling us, the shipping company. Something they're not telling Schroeder. The captain's in a tight spot, he is. Wouldn't want to be him for all the sugar in Cuba. Yosef backed away. He'd already forgotten about the stalls in the women's bathroom. If he and his family didn't make it to Cuba, they weren't allowed in. Where would they go? Isabel. It says the Straits of Florida, somewhere north of Cuba, 1994. So if you remember, Isabel and her family got on the boat with their neighbors, and at the last minute, her neighbor's older son, Luis, ran out from the police and jumped on board with his girlfriend, and the police were chasing them and shooting after them because he wasn't allowed to leave the police. So now they're in their boat. Isabel's father and Ivan and Luis's father were fighting over if Luis should have come because he endangered them all, is what her father said. Senor Castillo was in charge of the boat. No one had voted or named him captain, but he built the boat, after all, and he was the one at the rudder, steering it, so that put him in charge. He didn't look happy about it, though. He kept frowning at the motor and the rudder like there was something wrong, but besides a quick patch job of stuffing a sock into the bullet hole, everything was good. The lights of Havana had faded to a speck on the horizon behind them, and they left all the other boats behind. Isabel clung to the wooden bench she sat on, squeezed in between Ivan and her grandfather. Their boat was barely big enough for 7 people, and with Luis and his girlfriend, they were practically sitting on top of each other. I think it's time we met the other person on board with us, Isabel's grandfather said. Isabel thought he meant Luis's girlfriend, and instead he pushed some sacks of food and jugs and water out of the way and pointed to the bottom of the boat. Staring back at them was the huge face of Fidel Castro. Luis's girlfriend gasped and suddenly exploded with laughter. Soon all of them were laughing with her. Isabel laughed so hard her stomach hurt. Even grumpy Senor Castillo chuckled. I need something big and thick for the bottom of the boat, he said, and seeing how there were so many signs around with El Presidente's head on them. It was true. Castro's face was everywhere in Cuba, on billboards, on taxis, in picture frames, on schoolroom walls, painted on the sides of the buildings. It's kind of similar to how Hitler's picture was all over the boat that Yosef was riding in. Underneath the painting were the words, fight against the impossible and win. Well, Fidel is thick-headed, Luis said. Isabel put her hands over her mouth but couldn't help laughing again with everyone else. You weren't allowed to say things like that in Cuba. But they weren't in Cuba anymore, were they? Do you know what the greatest achievements of the Cuban Revolution are? Isabel's father asked. Education, public health, and sports, they all said together. It was a constant refrain in Castro's lengthy speeches. And do you know what the greatest failures are? He asked. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, the adults answered back, as though they'd heard that one many times before, too. Isabel smiled. That prompted someone to break out food and drinks, even though it was late. Isabel sipped from a bottle of soda. How long will it take to get to Florida? She asked. Senor Castillo shrugged. By tomorrow night, maybe. Tomorrow morning we'll have the sun to guide us. All that matters now is that we get as far away from Cuba as we can, said Luis's girlfriend. And what is your name, pretty one? Lito asked her. Amara, she said. She was very pretty, even in her blue police uniform. She had flawless olive skin, long black hair and full red lips. No, 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 Lito said. He fanned his face. Your name must be Summer because you're making me sweat. The girl smiled, but Isabel's mother slapped Lito on the leg. Oh, Poppy, stop it. You're old enough to be your grandfather. Lito took that as a challenge. He put his hand over his heart. I wish I was your favorite song, he said to Amara, so it could be on your lips forever. If your eyes were the sea, I would drown in them. Lito was giving her piropos, the flirtatious compliments Cuban men said to women on the streets. Not everyone did that anymore, but to Lito it was like an art form. Amara laughed and Louise smiled. Maybe we shouldn't talk about drowning, Poppy said, clutching to the side of the boat as they chopped into a wave. What do you think the States will be like? Isabel's mother asked everyone. Isabel had to stop and think about that. What would the United States be like? She hadn't had much time to even imagine it. Shelves full of food at the store, Senor Castillo said. Being able to travel anywhere we want, anytime we want, said Amara. I want to be able to choose who I vote for, Louise said. I want to play baseball for the New York Yankees, Ivan said. I want you to go to college first, his mother told him. I want to watch American television, Ivan said. The Simpsons. I'm going to open my own law office, Senor Castillo said. Isabel listened to everyone as they listed more and more things they were looking forward to in the States. Flows, food, sports, movies, travel, school opportunity. It all sounded so wonderful, but when it came down to it, all Isabel really wanted was a place where she and her family could be together and be happy. What do you think El Norte will be like, Poppy? Isabel asked. Her father looked surprised at the question. No more ministry of telling people what to think or else, he said. No more getting thrown in jail for disagreeing with the government. What do you want to do when you get there? Senor Castillo asked. He hesitated while everyone stared at him, his eyes searching Castro's face on the bottom of the boat, as though there were answers hidden there. Be free, Poppy said finally. Let's have a song, Lito said. Cabela, play us a song on your trumpet. Isabel's chest tightened. She told her parents what she'd done, but not Lito. She knew he would never have let her do it. I traded my trumpet, she confessed, for the gasoline. Her grandfather was shocked. But that trumpet was everything to you. No, not everything, Isabel thought. It wasn't my mother and my father and you, Lito. I'll get another one in the States, she said. Lito shook his head. Here, let's have a song anyway. And he began singing a salsa song and tapping at the rhythm on the side of the metal boat. Soon the whole boat was sitting, and Lito stood and held out a hand to Amara, inviting her to dance. Poppy, sit down. You'll fall off the boat, Isabel's mother told him. I can't fall out of the boat because I already have fallen for this princess of the sea, he said. Amara laughed and took his hand, and the two of them danced as best they could in the swaying boat. Mommy started counting clave by clapping, and Isabel frowned, trying to follow the beat. Still can't hear it, Cabela? Lito asked. Isabel closed her eyes and focused. She could almost hear it, almost. And then the motor sputtered and died, and the music stopped. Now we're on to Mahmoud. In Kilis, Turkey, 2015, 2 days away from home. So when we left off with Mahmoud, he and his family had taken the car and they were going to leave. And then these soldiers stopped them and told them not to go the way they were going because it was all blocked off by fighting. And the soldiers got in the car with them and made them kind of backtrack. And then people started shooting at the car. One of the soldiers died. Then they had to leave their car behind. And Mahmoud's father had to run back and get his phone. Mahmoud could hear music beyond the fence. It was hard to see for all the people. He stood in a long line with his family, waiting at the border to gain admission into Turkey, near the city of Kilis. Around them were countless more Syrian families, all hoping to be let in. They carried everything they owned with them, sometimes in suitcases and duffel bags, more often stuffed into pillowcases and trash bags. Okay, so I'm seeing some more similarities here. They are hoping to be let into Turkey the way that Yosef's family is hoping to be let in to Cuba. Men wore jeans and t-shirts and tracksuits. Women wore dresses and abayas and hijabs. Their children looked like miniature versions of them and acted like miniature adults too. There was very little crying and whining, and none of the kids were playing. They had all walked too far and seen too much. After leaving the car behind, Mahmoud and his family had followed the map on their phones, skirting cities held by Daesh and the Syrian army and the rebels and the Kurds as best they could. Google Maps told them it would be an 8-hour walk, and they split the journey by sleeping in a field. It was hot out by day, but it got cold at night, and Mahmoud and his family had left all their extra clothes in the car in their haste to escape. The next morning, they had seen the people. Dozens of them, hundreds, refugees just like Mahmoud and his family, who had left their homes in Syria and were walking north to Turkey to safety. Mahmoud and his family had fallen into step with them and disappeared among their ranks, invisible, just like Mahmoud liked it. Together, the shambling throng of refugees was ignored by American drones and the rebel rocket launchers, and the Syrian army tanks and the Russian jets. Mahmoud heard explosions and saw smoke clouds, but no one cared about a few hundred Syrian people leaving the battlefield. And now they were in line with him, all those hundreds of people and thousands more, and they weren't invisible anymore. Turkish guards in light green camo gear with automatic weapons and white surgical masks over their faces walked up and down the line, staring at each of them in turn. Mahmoud felt like he was in trouble. He wanted to look away, but he was worried that might make the guards think he was hiding something. But if he looked right at them, they would notice him and maybe pull him and his family out of line. Mahmoud stared straight ahead at his father's back instead. His father's shirt was stained to the armpits. With a quick sniff of his own shirt, Mahmoud realized he stank too. They had walked for hours in the hot sun without a bath, without a change of clothes. They looked tired and poor and wretched. If he were a Turkish border guard, he wouldn't have let any of these dirty, squalid people, himself included, into their country. Mahmoud's father kept their papers tucked into his pants under his shirt, along with all of their money, the only other things they owned now, besides 2 phones and 2 chargers. When Mahmoud and his family finally got to the front line, late in the day, Mahmoud's father presented their official documents to the border agent. After what seemed like an eternity of looking over the papers, the border guard finally stamped temporary visas onto their passports and let them through. They were in Turkey. Mahmoud couldn't believe it. Step after step, kilometer after kilometer, he'd begun to think that they would never ever escape Syria. But as relieved as he was, he knew they still had very far to go. Remember, their destination is ultimately Germany. The place at, like 80 years before, Yusuf's trying to flee. Ahead of them stretched a small city of white canvas tents, their pointed tops staggered like whitecaps on a choppy sea. There were no trees, no shade, no parks, or football fields or rivers. Just a sea of tents and a forest of electric poles and wires. Hey, we're in luck, Mahmoud joked. The circus is in town. Mahmoud's dad joked. The circus is in town. Mahmoud looked around. There was a main street in the camp, a wide lane where refugees had set up little shops selling phone cars and camp stoves and clothes and things people had brought with them, but no longer wanted and needed. It was like a giant rummage sale, and it seemed like everybody in the camp was there. The path was crammed full of Syrians, all strolling along like they had nothing else to do and nowhere else to go. All right, Mahmoud's father was saying, a man in the group we walked with gave you the name of a smuggler who can get us from Turkey to Greece. A smuggler? Mom said. Mahmoud didn't like the sound of that either. To him, a smuggler meant illegal, and illegal meant dangerous. Dad waved their fears away. It's fine. This is what they do. They get people into the EU. The EU, Mahmoud knew, was the European Union. He also knew that they were much more strict about letting people in than Turkey was. Once you were in the EU countries, though, like Greece or Hungary or Germany, you could apply for asylum and be granted official refugee status. So asylum means like you need protection because you're in danger in your own country. It was getting there that was the hard part. I've been talking to him on WhatsApp. Dad continued holding up his phone. It will be expensive, but we can pay. And we'll have to get to Izmir on the Turkish coast. Assuming we stop to sleep every night, that's a 19-day walk. Or it's a 12-hour car ride. Not stop. I'll see if I can find us a bus. Mahmoud and his mother and sister and brother walked on the shopping street. People called out to one another in Arabic, and music from radios and TVs filled the air. Other children darted in and out among the adults, laughing and chasing each other into the alleys of tents off the main drive. Mahmoud caught himself smiling. After Aleppo, the near constant gunfire and explosions, punctuated by the oppressive quiet of an entire city trying their hardest not to draw attention to themselves, this place felt alive, even if it was dusty and cramped. Mahmoud saw a cardboard box of used toys at one of the shops and knelt in to dig in it while his mother and brother and sister walked on. He sifted through it, hoping, yes, a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. It was the one with the red bandana. The box didn't have any other Ninja Turtles in it, but Waleed would be excited to get it. Mahmoud hoped so, at least. Waleed didn't seem to get excited about much these days. Mahmoud paid 10 Syrian pounds for it, about 5 cents in American money. A car honked behind Mahmoud, and he turned like everybody else. It was an old blue Opel taxi traveling so slowly Mahmoud could walk faster. It was the only car Mahmoud had seen in the camp, and the crowd parted for it as it drew closer. A Syrian pop song blared from the radio, and young men and women danced and laughed alongside the taxi. As it passed, Mahmoud saw a young couple sitting in the back. The woman was dressed in a white satin dress and veil. It was a marriage procession, Mahmoud realized. Back in Syria, it was a tradition to be escorted to your wedding by a parade of cars to help carry you into your new life. Mahmoud remembered his uncle's wedding before the war. His uncle had worn a tuxedo, and his bride had worn a dress of sparkling jewels and a tiara. And they had been escorted by a dozen cars to a party where Mahmoud had eaten a piece of the delicious 7-tiered cake and danced with his mother to a real band. Here, the couple's only escort was a group of rowdy teenage boys running behind the taxi. Their destination was a dirty white tent with whatever food they'd been able to buy at the camp's market. But everybody seemed to be having fun. The old taxi's exhaust pipe made a sound like a gunshot. Pop! And everybody ducked instinctively. The spell of happiness and safety was momentarily broken, but by the unforgettable memories of chaos they had just escaped. Mahmoud's heart was still racing when someone put a hand on his shoulder and he jumped. It was his dad. Mahmoud, where's your mother? Where are Walid and Hannah? His father asked. I found us a ride, but we have to leave now. And that's the end of part 5. So that was page 74 to 92. And I'm seeing more similarities with the stories, like how the refugees are celebrating in the midst of their difficult journeys, like with the bar mitzvah, with the wedding, the dancing and singing on the boat. So there's a lot of similarities that are popping up in these 3 stories in different times in history. So thanks for listening to part 5. Oh, and I keep forgetting to say this is read by permission from Scholastic Books.